I didn't notice that I went into seizures. I just didn't feel well. And then suddenly I was looking at my own face.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Veil. Today, we hear from Angela Harris, whose near-death experience unraveled a journey through death, love, memory, and realities far beyond our own.
I'm Angela Harris. I had an NDE in 2015. At the time, I was a teacher and a mother to small elementary school children. I was having a lot of health issues. I ended up in the hospital on a tilt table. And the point of a tilt table is actually to make you pass out. So I passed with flying colors because at 18 minutes, I went into seizures because all of my vital signs had plummeted like they were on a ski slope and they had hit the bottom. And my husband saw me die. At that point, I ejected from my body and I had what a lot of NDEers talk about as the 360-degree vision. And I immediately was looking at myself. So I didn't notice that I went into seizures, just didn't feel well. And then suddenly I was looking at my own face. I didn't really recognize myself. I didn't care that I was looking at myself. I didn't care about my body. I didn't care that I was dead. All I felt was release from the pain that I had been in, release from the pain of being inside a human body, and love. All the love that everyone talks about on the other side. I kind of came home to my true self and I felt at peace. And all at that time, simultaneously, I was realizing I was in the same space as my husband, who was in this tiny little medical room with me while I was hooked up to all these machines, monitoring my vital signs, watching his wife die, and struggling with that moment. My heart just went out to him. I felt all of his pain, all of his anguish, and I just knew that I loved him so much, and we were meant to be. You know, it was more than just a basic marriage connection, because I was on the other side and I had so much more access to information about us. I could see the doctor who was motioning to the nurse, right? Because this is all happening within a second, 2 seconds. And at the same time, the nurse was sitting at my feet in a chair to monitor whether I was trying to wiggle around or move, because that's part of the test. And she stood up and I felt her come up through my shoulders and through my head. So I could see her face, and then I could see the back of her head as she moved past me to go and put the tilt table down. So the tilt table's up like this and back about 5 degrees, kind of like an eject button. She was going to press that button so that it would lower and I would let my vital signs normalize and come back to life. And all at the same time. So this is all occurring all at once. I'm moving backwards to the corner of the room, the left side of the room, up at the ceiling, and I'm watching all this going on. And I feel over my shoulder a space that's new to me and different. And I look into it. So I turn my focus to it, right? I don't have a body. And it's the black velvety void. And I slip into the black velvety void. And why do I use the terms black velvety void? Because when I was in it, it was like I couldn't hear anything. I could see a person I'll talk about in just a minute, or someone, an entity presenting as a human, or perhaps that I was seeing as a human. The void that I was in, it was black, but it wasn't all-encompassing black. If you think about it at night, when you close your eyes, you can kind of see blobs or whatever. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like when you turn the lights out and the room is totally black and you can see literally nothing, right? It wasn't like that. It was more like when you see interpretations of a tunnel and you can kind of see a soft roundness to it. No edges. I wouldn't describe them as edges, but like a shimmering softness to it that wasn't entirely black, but was darker grays and, just it felt velvety to me, that if I touched it, it would be soft and comforting.
But what waited inside that velvety darkness wasn't emptiness. It was a doorway, and someone familiar was already there to meet her.
That's how I felt there. Still had that love within me. I felt at peace. I felt comfortable. The space, to me, in my perception, was calming. It wasn't fearful. And next to me, in this sense of moving together, like walking along together, was a woman. And this woman's name is Melanie. And the very interesting thing to me about this is that we were continuing a conversation. So I had just left my body on Earth. I didn't know anything about Melanie. If you had asked me about Melanie before I started this experience, I would have had no idea what you were talking about. But here I am on the other side, next to Melanie, and she's fantastic. We're continuing conversation. It's like you've known your best friend your whole life and you're hanging out with them and you're chatting. That's what it was like. That's what it felt like to me. And it wasn't about, hey, you just died. Are you doing okay? It was more like those thoughts you have in your head of, wow, I feel so comfortable. And she's saying, well, yes, you're released from your body and we're going on to this new space. Come along with me. And if you wonder what she looks like, I saw her as having long dark hair. She had these kind of beautiful chestnut eyes, beautiful in a conventional kind of way. She was wearing kind of that creamy robe that a lot of people talk about. She was carrying a book in her arms. I never saw a title on the book. She never opened the book. I didn't get to see what was in it, but I have a very good feeling it was the book of my life. And that was my life was being represented in her arms. And we were moving. There was a sense of movement, as I was describing the black velvety feel. There was a changing to that. There was a sense of movement and you're moving along and you can feel that. I felt that exact same feeling, even though I left my body, right? And we moved forward and I could see, pinprick of light, which very quickly became much more than that. And as we were approaching this light, I could see shadows or movement in there, things coming into view and into vision. And as we entered the space, it was kind of like entering a subway tunnel. If you've ever ridden a subway and it's dark in the spaces in between the stations. And then as you come into the station, it comes over you like this. That's what it was like for me. And I entered into this white velvety space. So again, this next space that I was in, no walls, very soft, almost cotton or cloud-like feel to this white surroundings that I was in. In my case, I didn't hear any music, but I did see many, many, many people there waiting for me, and they were all very joyous and very happy to see me. It was a huge welcoming party, and at the front of this group, which extended far into the distance, I could see it was shadows in the back. If I looked at a shadow, I knew who it was. I remembered them, but so many people from this life and from others, from past lives as well. And the people at the front were the people that I knew from this life. So these souls had come to welcome me. And my soul family that was there included my grandparents, aunts and uncles, unfortunately some friends from along the way. And when I would greet them, I was able to hug them. And it felt like a hug. It was real. I was holding them in my arms. We'd kiss each other on the cheeks. And the most beautiful part of it is that when I would hug them, I'd remember everything from both viewpoints. So, for example, I hugged my uncle. My uncle lived on a farm. And when I hugged him, I experienced several different things from life from him and being with him before he passed. But one particular memory stuck with me, and that was being on the farm on a sunny day during the summer. And if you've been on a farm during the summer, you know that the sun heats things up and it gets this really rich smell to it. And then there's all the sound of walking on the hay, the sound of the creaking gates on the barn, the goats, the chickens, the dogs, all the family. There's all of that, the sounds and the smells and the sights. And I was there. It was that exact same day happening all over again.
But the memories were only a beginning. Deeper revelations about her family, her future, and her soul were waiting just ahead.
And the really interesting thing to me is that it wasn't just my memory, his memory too. That was so beautiful. So I did that with lots of people. I did that with my grandparents. I did that with a friend who committed suicide when I was in high school. They were just such beautiful, glorious moments in all the same way I just explained, where I was able to see both sides of it and have a lot of understanding and healing. And it has affected me now that I approach situations much more differently. I'm much more communicative. I use my intuition and express my intuition a lot more. If I notice that someone feels a certain way, but might be verbally expressing themselves differently, I enter that space, try to be gentle about it, and try to resolve it right there in that moment. And then in that same time, I'm realizing, okay, I'm kind of coming home to I'm dead. And this whole time, I'm thinking about my family. I'm looking back at my family. And when I do, it's like a portal in the white opens up. And I can see my husband in the hospital room. I can see my children, where they are. And a very interesting thing is happening when I'm looking at my children. They're kind of flickering. Like if you take a light switch and you turn it on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off at about that rate. That's why I was doing that. And I would see them as they were in that moment in time on Earth. But then the flicker, so when the light would go off, if you will, I would see them as adults in the future. And my daughter was very young. Gosh, she was in first grade. And I saw her as this beautiful adult woman wearing a white lab coat. And in that moment, I see their futures. I knew why I was seeing them the way that they were. I would see my other daughter, who was at that time in fourth grade, in her future as a man. And that has occurred. So my daughter, Lily, at that time is now Adam as an adult and has transitioned. And I kept that to myself the whole time. I never mentioned anything to either one of them until they got to that space where they had already made the decisions to become what I saw. And they made those decisions on their own and got there on their own. And then, as I'm going through all this and thinking about my family and really coming home to, okay, I'm back home because that's how it felt. That's where I'm truly from. This is who I truly am. I'm where I'm supposed to be. Earth is like a little vacation trip to try things out. Not where I'm truly from is the best way to say it. I'm also accessing all of this information. So as soon as I think something, the answer is right there, to the point that it was kind of like standing in a river. When I think back on it, I remember being a child and my parents were fly fishing, and I remember standing in a river and putting my hands out as the river's flowing past me like this and feeling the water pass. And that's what it reminds me of, that I had access to the past, the present, the future, according to where I am right now, where I was in that moment, and all of the changes that could come about through free will within all of that. I guess some people would call it the Akashic Records. It was just, like I said, a river of all knowing. And I went into this river whenever I would have a memory of who I was, or I would have a question about something. So I then would rush off to wherever it was. So I would go off and I would see the memory and I would experience that memory all over again, whether it was a human life or a non-human life, which I'll address in just a second. Or, well, what about the future? And then I would kind of rush off and it would feel like I left that white space and I would go to a space where I would see these possible futures. When I say rushing off, it was like, I always get confused between Star Trek and Star Wars, so don't quote me, but they're on the ship and you're in the ship and they go to warp speed and the stars are flying by, and that's what it was like. So darkness, but moving through the stars at a very high rate of speed. And I went to see myself, or to clarify, part of my soul, another me, if you will, living in a different body on a different planet. And I came into this space of this other entity over the left shoulder of this entity, which has a blue body. And this entity seemed to acknowledge that I was there because she turned towards me and looked at me. I didn't see anything behind this entity. And then I also saw myself as what a lot of people describe as a mantis being, very much like an ant, very kind of rusty red exoskeleton body, circular eyes, very dark eyes, very round So if you think about, a sphere, if you cut a sphere in half, really if you take like the top quarter off of it and lay it flat and it's shiny, and then you can see light in little half or quarter moon shapes to show that arc, that I saw that. The typical body. So, thorax and abdomen, the kinds of legs that you would expect to see with that type of body, little arms, and then antenna on the nose, which was different. I don't remember seeing anything like that here. Again, didn't see anything behind this entity that would indicate a space, a ship, a room, nothing like that. We did not speak to each other. I didn't speak to either one of these entities vocally, orally, but we definitely acknowledged each other, looked at each other, both knew, hey, I'm here. And that's what tells me that was me, because in that moment, I'm seeing me living another life, a different life in a different space, as what a lot of people here would define as an alien, but is really just another soul on another planet doing the same things I'm doing here as a human.
But beyond past lives, Angela also glimpsed the futures we might create, some peaceful, some shaped by struggle.
So that was, again, another eye-opening experience that I brought back with me, and it took me a long time to process that, acknowledge that, come home to that. It took me listening to other people talking about it to feel safe to talk about it. So, if you're listening and you're experiencing moments like that, I understand. And I do. And I'm happy to talk with you about it. And then I saw the future. Like I was saying, I was thinking about the future, and my mind went into that direction. And I saw a future where we return to a much more, not agrarian society. That's not the way that it works, but we live more locally. So if you think about how we're living in a very global society right now, and business is very global, and we're all very connected across the world. This was a very different space than that. We had retracted from that. There were wars that happened. We lost a lot of population. And at this particular moment that I was accessing, we had moved back to living in more localized cities, farming, living in our own spaces, making what we needed, but still having that global thread, still having technology, just using it a lot differently and a lot more peacefully. This particular access to a future was really about what we're seeing with migration right now, and how migration is causing a lot of strife and upset and fear in people. And we get to a point where that's gone. And there basically is no migration. We all recognize that we're one from the one source, and we live together beautifully and peacefully. And I don't have access to it. Well, I don't specifically remember a time frame from that, but I will tell you what I feel of it in the memories I have. It's not too far off. And after that, I pretty much went into a life review, and it was very much like people describe. I would come back to that white space. My family was there. Melanie was there. The life review was in my 360 vision. So I wouldn't say it was like projected on a wall or a movie screen opened up. It was more like I just could access it. And it was exactly what people talk about with the life review, in that I saw most of my life going by like a movie. I saw good and bad. And one of the things that really stuck with me that I want to share with you is about bad people. Why do bad things happen? Why is there evil? I had a good childhood growing up. I had a lot of happy moments. My parents were, good parents for the most part, but my father was abusive. He had probably what most people would describe as a section, and he took that out on me. And in that life review, then I was able to see that we plan our lives. And this is very hard to hear for a lot of people. We planned that. If you want to look at another story, Betty Guadagno talks about this as well. We planned to play what could be described as good and evil, right? So he went to Earth to learn things. His soul went there because it wanted to experience certain things which would make his soul stronger, and consequently make all of us stronger, because we're all one. And I went there to serve in a space where I could make that happen for him. So I could put myself in a space where he could do what he needed to do to grow his soul, to grow our souls, and likewise the same thing for me. So that helped me understand that situation so much better when I was able to access that memory of that life review experience when I came back to Earth. And then as the life review is coming to an end, I'm realizing, because here's another really interesting thing about good and evil and all of that, right? So I've left my human body, and when we're in our human bodies, we're under the veil and we have these expectations, which are very different than when you go home. Because like I was just talking about, if I planned a life where I agreed to be used, which seems so strange on this side, that's a really good view into how we are thinking so differently on the other side. So here I am in this life review, and the only person who judges you, the only entity that judges you on the other side is you. So the only person judging me is me. Every other entity around me, every other soul, every other person is so loving and compassionate and, holding me and cheering me on for going through these things. But I'm still chastising myself about these choices I made because I'm still partially connected with my human body, with my human self. Angela's still in there. And as I'm chastising myself, I'm thinking, well, on Earth, we're told if we don't do things right, we're supposed to go to purgatory or hell or something like that. Maybe I should do that.
And just as she questioned her own worth, a familiar voice called her back, ending the journey as suddenly as it began.
At the exact same time, Melanie, all telepathic, is thinking, wait, no, you are a very good person and we love you and we support you, and right, all in the same moment, right? Just like when I was in the hospital room and it's all happening instantaneously. My mother-in-law, who had passed from lung cancer, says she has to go take care of the kids. And I wake up on the tilt table in the hospital room. I mean, if you think about that from the human side, it's kind of funny in a way. So that was amazing. And when I woke up in my body, I didn't want to be awake. I wanted to go back because it was so beautiful and peaceful there. Everything is joyous. And I was able to see that even if I stayed, my family would be fine without me. They would go on to live these amazing lives, different lives, but amazing lives. And I just shut my eyes as tight as I could and thought, if I keep my eyes closed really tight, maybe I can go back, which didn't happen. And yeah, it was so weird to be back in my body. It was like settling down, and I could see all the way, or feel all the way into my body, all the way down to my toes. And it was like there was nothing there. Like it was almost like the velvety void. It's just black. So I remember coming into my body and feeling this big black body. It was all hot and wet and gross. And eventually I just kind of settled down into it and have gotten back to not an entirely normal space. I mean, this rocked my world. It set me back on my feet, and I am a different person. Anybody who knew me before will say I'm a different person. I was nice before. I'm nice now. None of that has changed that much. I make different choices, though. Much more compassionate, much more loving, much more calm than I was before. And I see things now through the lens of the other side. So music is different to me. When I walk around outside, I'm not just on a walk. I'm in awe, like literal awe, every single time. Look at the sky. Look at the trees. Oh my gosh, look at this chipmunk. It comes into you and it renews your soul. It renews you and reminds you of who you truly are, which is not a person. It's a soul. You're a soul driving a human body, human bus. Use that knowledge to go forth and love. Thank you.